Welcome to Real World, Real Talk with Dr. D.Z. Cofield. The show represents captivating conversations and insightful information to encourage and inspire you with all you need to become the best you can possibly be. And now, your host for Real World, Real Talk, Dr. D.Z. Cofield.
What's up, everybody? What's going on in the Houston community and around the globe? This is Dr. D.Z. Cofield, and you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. Man, I'm excited to have our guest with us today. It's going to be a powerful show in the midst of everything that's going on, not just the COVID-19 pandemic, but the racist, misogynistic pandemic that we have been dealing with up to 400 years ago. We're going to talk today about what now? How do we move forward in a positive way? There are thousands, hundreds of thousands, some would say millions of people protesting, not just in this country, but around the world as we look at the murder of George Floyd. But there are so many things that are going on in our country that need to be changed. And the question is, how will we facilitate that happening? I'm listening to people saying things like, this time it's going to be different. Well, what's going to make it different this time? How are we going to move beyond rhetoric and beyond marches and protests to substantive change in order to dismantle a racist system of government that we live under here? And my guest is going to help us to do that on today. Now, just a couple of housekeeping matters before we go any further. If you'd like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on Instagram at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Facebook at DZ Cofield. And you can also follow me on Twitter at DZ Cofield. If you have some suggestions, you can make those to us via RWRTDZ at all platforms. That's RWRT, Real World, Real Talk, DZ at any platform you can think of. Okay. Listen, I'm happy to welcome to our show a brother that I consider a colleague, a peer, a friend, brother that I met out on the battlefield. And man, this dude is making it happen in a very real way. And I'm excited to have him with us. Ashton P Woods is our guest today. He's a civil rights activist and defender of the public good. He has a dedicated track record of fighting for all of Houston. Getting his start in organizing at the age of 15, Ashton has been consistent in his commitment to creating better opportunities for all. He's a New Orleans native, and he has made Houston his home since 2005, shortly before Hurricane Katrina. Equity, fairness, and justice are at the center of Ashton's advocacy and work. He continues to be a strong advocate for the community of people living with HIV/AIDS, as well as speaking out to end rape and sexual assault. Known for his exemplary activist track record, Ashton has stood in solidarity with the immigrant community and championed against the formation of detention centers in Houston. He has always been a fearless advocate for the LGBTQIA community. In 2016, Ashton was appointed to the City of Houston's first LGBT advisory board. Committed to progress and community, Ashton has focused on a range of issues, including fighting for the homeless community, advocating for affordable housing, holding law enforcement and public officials accountable to the citizens of Houston, and ending violence against people of color. He is the co-founder and lead organizer for Black Lives Matter Houston. From mobilizing support and working in collaboration with relief organizations after Hurricane Harvey to fighting school privatization, Ashton is present for people when it matters most. When he isn't organizing, Ashton acts as co-chair for the Black Humanist Alliance, a coalition of secular activists under the American Humanist Association. Ashton has been a speaker at numerous high schools and college campuses. He is a facilitator and presenter at multiple national convenings representing Houston wherever he goes. Man, I love this brother. We talking about real world, real talk. He keeps it real. Come on, join me and welcoming to Real World Real Talk today, Ashton P Woods. Ashton, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's going on, bro? It's good to see you.
I appreciate you so much. I appreciate the work that you're doing, not just with Black Lives Matter, but you're working in so many areas, and we'll talk about the interrelatedness of what you do, because I think a lot of times when we think about immigration, when we think about LGBTQ rights, when we think about Black Lives Matters, we see them in silos, and we don't see them speaking to an oppressive, systemic problem that is going on in our country. I'll get to that a little bit later on. But here's what I want to know. What were you thinking? What were you thinking, man, when you heard about what happened to George Floyd? Because I've had that question asked of me, and I knew George. I didn't know him really, really well, but he worked with our church on some projects over in the Bricks. And I didn't even know it was him, of course. I just heard, hey, man, a brother got killed in Minnesota.
I didn't hear. I saw.
Okay.
Video, I turned on the TV, and there it was. And it took a lot of energy out of me. I was already kind of tired, mentally, emotionally tired, because for the past month, since April 25th, you had Christopher Gary, Adrian Medeiros, Rayshard Scales, Randy Lewis, and a few other people who are not identified yet that had been murdered in interactions with Houston Police Department. And to compound the no-knock rate on Breonna Taylor and the young man Tony, who happened to be Black and trans in Florida, who had got gunned down by law enforcement there. And the issue is that people don't realize this, but when you put it in perspective, George Floyd has been our flashpoint because we were able to see it. We heard him calling out for his mom. We heard him saying he can't breathe for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And people stood by. Those three other cops stood by and looked the other way. And that's indicative of how white people and people who think that they got their bag, the coons of the world, look away when they don't want to see color. Oh, I don't see color. Yes, you do, because you don't want to acknowledge the racism that comes with the color. The fact that blackness is a social construct given to us by white men so that they can have overarching power over a group of people because of their own inferiority complexes. So when George Floyd got murdered, and I watched that video, I think that was the beginning of me not sleeping right. Last night was the first night in a long time that I actually got a full 8 hours of sleep, because I had been having trouble sleeping, or I would just wake up out of my sleep. I found myself anxious, upset, impatient, and wanted to do something, but also there was a mental faculty to it, because I've been thinking about all of the stuff that people have been going through during this pandemic as well.
Right.
And in the back of my mind, in the initial closures of Houston, with Black Lives Matter, Houston had pulled together and gotten $25 gift cards and delivered them to people. We sent some people stuff through Cash App as we were able to raise it, just to make sure people have food. And I started that petition to get Greg Abbott to suspend rents and mortgages, even though the Supreme Court came and did it anyway. We're now in the month of June, and in a matter of days or weeks, there's going to be a massive amount of evictions.
Yeah.
Black people are, if we connect the dots of what happened to George Floyd, we're seen as less than human. And that means that our health care is trash, our access to quality of life is trash, and you're telling people who got laid off from work to stay home and cook from home, and when the only thing they have to go to get groceries from is the dollar store because that's all that's in their neighborhood. How can that allow someone to be healthy? What's fresh about that food?
Right.
You know what I mean? And you think about everything else that comes with that, and it's compounding oppression. And so that was what all hit me when I saw that. All of that stuff that I had been able to suppress and move around with had been brought to the surface. And so that caused the insomnia, the anger issues, and just trying to work extra hard to like mind my manners and my temperament. Because at any moment, just like George, it could have been me, it could have been you, it could have been our sister, our mother, it could have been anybody.
Yeah.
And that's what this is about. You know, I keep thinking about the larger picture because I've been doing this for a while now. I started doing this when I was 15 years old, and I'm 35 now. And you met me when I was at least 24 out there a lot on the streets.
Yeah.
And the thing that has remained constant is that people come and go. There are very few times where I've seen that I can count on two hands where there have been activists who have been consistent, like you, myself, and a few other people who are just kind of sticking around to do the work. And that work looks like making sure that we're working with our legislators and our city council members and our commissioners court members to hold them accountable. Because I think what we're witnessing here is the idea that just because I liked you and voted for you, it doesn't excuse you from me holding you accountable. That doesn't excuse you from me cussing you the hell out of the city council meeting when your police union, when you let the police union president get on camera and threaten Black Lives Matter because one officer botched a raid that killed two people that probably would not have gotten attention if it was two Black people.
Right.
And then think about connecting the dots furthermore. You'll find that out there on the internet, there's a letter from Kim Ock's office that was dated from this year that was sent to Gerald Floyd, telling him that he was affected by the Harding Street raid because of Gerald Goins being investigated.
Right.
So you see how there's this connectivity to the criminal justice system, policing, and overall quality of life. You can't have one without the other. If you're going to address it, you got to address it all, and you got to be honest about it. And what's been painful about all of this is that we have the largest amount of Black people on city council in Houston's history. Sylvester Turner is in his second term as the second ever Black mayor of Houston. Let's put this stuff into perspective. So when I saw that video, I thought about all of this stuff, and I keep thinking, oh yeah, by the way, HPD is allowed to meet with the city of Houston and negotiate their pay and their policies and their contracts without being public. They get to keep that stuff secret, right? So that means we don't know if they have policies on de-escalation. And a lot of times people don't realize we're one of 5 cities in the entire country that HPD, we have a police department where their rules and regulations are redacted. They're not public knowledge. We don't know what they're told about what they can and can't do. Mayor Turner has had time to get this squared away. He is now in his second term. He has nothing to lose. He can't run for anything else in the city government. I don't understand what's happening here. How can you justify cutting people's jobs in different departments for the city of Houston while talking about putting $1.3 billion on the line to give to the police department and vote on it next week? When we can defund the PD and actually have a chance to shape the rules and regulations while working with the commissioner's court to force them to provide data from all of the different law enforcement agencies, because there are over 150 of them in Harris County alone. And each of them have their own data sets. This is the opportunity, really, to be honest with you. For example, when Kim Ock wanted 100 new prosecutors, right? And we all came out against that. We asked her to justify her data. If you can't justify your data or you won't share that data, you can't justify why you need 100 extra prosecutors criminalizing people. Why do you need this amount of money to add more police officers? Okay, well, show me what the crimes are. Show me the data of the arrests. Show me why you still label Latino people as white to skew the number of people of color that are being arrested within the jail system. Why do we treat our jail as a mental health care facility? Because think about this for a second, just to go even further down the rabbit hole. An 80-year-old white woman was murdered in Houston a few weeks ago. They made a big deal out of it. I know you remember this, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What they didn't tell people is R.A. Acevedo and all these other people were running around using Republican talking points saying that it was because of misdemeanor bail reform. This was a felony court judge named Herb Ritchie, who was a Republican, that released this man to a mental health care facility because he was deemed unfit to stand trial, which means that he needed help, mental health care. So how did he get out of the facility to be able to commit a murder, allegedly? Number one. Number two, why would you assassinate that man's character if you knew in fact that this was the case? Right? It's tragic that someone died, right? Let's acknowledge that. No one deserves to die before their time. right? But we also have to recognize that we're talking about the same type of law enforcement that will give Dylan Roof a whopper after killing a church full of 30 people and blow up a guy in Dallas after the Dallas shooting for shooting at police officers because they didn't know how to handle that. But you had a white boy with automatic weapons that could shoot up a church, and you got him a whopper and made sure he was comfortable. Sure, Jan.
Right.
So
right.
This is what I mean by that. So when we're talking about these issues, when we're talking about bail reform, we don't even have felony bail reform. And let's get down to the nitty gritty. We have misdemeanor bail reform because a federal court judge said that our criminal justice system in that context was unconstitutional. So we have to hold them accountable with their talking points, with the lies that they spout out, with how they assassinate the characters of the people who have been murdered at the hands of HPD or whatever law enforcement agency is involved locally or nationally, and actually point to the issues and address those issues head on, not hugging protesters, not marching with said protesters, right? Because when you marched with those protesters, you had all these videos, you went viral, you had 1 million views, or Azevedo, but those same protesters that you was with 2 hours later got gassed and then was put on a hot bus and then was sent into a facility off-site from the Harris County Processing Center so that they would get booked in much slower than normal and made to stand in their room together while zip-tied for over 10 hours at a time. You're arresting people who are deaf that are telling you that they're deaf and charging them with failure to comply with verbal commands. These people are monsters.
You raise a tremendous issue. For those of you just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and I have with me in our virtual studio, Ashton P Woods, who is the local chair and lead organizer of Black Lives Matter Houston. You raise a number of issues, so let me go down the list. As you were speaking, several things were coming to my mind. First of all, let's talk a little bit about Chief Acevedo. Very, 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 very interesting. One, I give him credit. I was really surprised, and I told Chief Finner this. I was talking to him about another matter. I was really surprised that they came out so quickly and condemned the murder of George Floyd. I was shocked. And I'm not saying that anything of substance comes from that. I'm just saying I was shocked publicly, the optics that all the police, major city leaders said, hey, we condemn this. Surprised to see him marching. But I loved the accountability, to your point, to say, bruh, what's going on in Houston? Like, you got 6 unsolved murders here.
Right.
Are the officers being fired here? What's happening? And I know that the police unions in Texas have done a tremendous job of setting up legislative loopholes for themselves. They've set up a system that if they get fired, literally, I remember Chief McClellan, he had to fire somebody 2 or 3 times to finally get them off the force. And the arbitration system, the mediation, it's absolutely insane. That's a whole nother show that we can do. But the accountability of that moment when the cameras were gone and people were like, hey, okay, what's up, Chief? You know, and like, F you. Like, nah, we don't want to hear that. You know, what for you was so powerful about that? Because that accountability piece, man, that's the piece that has frustrated me so much. We embrace and love the kumbaya moments. And it's like, okay, but bruh,
I'll tell you what it is. I'm gonna tell you what it is. Point blank, we're still seen as niggers, first and foremost. That means that we're seen as less than human, and that means that our lived experience is being treated as anecdotal. And a lot of these people coming from ivory tower mentalities, when we talk about verifiable sources, remember that from school?
Yeah.
We talk about forms of media. When we look at government officials as official, their word is honored as gold. And I feel like our local media, in some sense, depending on the station you're watching, has failed us because sometimes they come off as an extension of Sylvester Turner's press office when they're supposed to be doing investigative journalism. We're in week 2 of all of this. And we did that panel last night on channel13.com, and half of it was about R.A. Acevedo. and how to comply and complain later. Let me tell you something. I'm never going to tell my damn child how to comply or complain with no damn pig. I'm going to tell you why. Because I'm going to teach them to know their rights. I'm not trying to tell the child to be disrespectful, and I don't even have a child yet, but I will one day. But I want my child to understand that, no, you have your rights. I'm going to give you a Ziploc bag. I'm going to put your driver's license in it, your registration in it, and your insurance card in it, and you're going to take that sucker to the window. We're going to buy you a dash cam. So if anything goes down, we're going to know what's happening. No more of this comply and complain later. You comply with the law. You do what they tell you to do. Yes, and all of that, right? Because you don't want to put yourself at risk. But what you won't do is go out there without being equipped, without knowing to know, hey, am I being detained? Or knowing that the officer has to get your consent to search your vehicle. Things like that, right? Because personal autonomy for Black people has always been a challenge. That's what this is about. And so when he decided to march back with those people, by my count, unofficially, there have been 1,800 people arrested in Houston from last Friday through this week. That is more than in New York City. And then when you talk about the 150 white supremacist organizations that live within Houston and Harris County, they're talking about people coming from San Antonio, Dallas, and Austin. No, they're right here in our backyard. And they're the ones agitating. And some of them are your cops walking around flashing white power signs and all this stuff. This is about them vetting their police officers. This is about possibly abolishing the police. This is about making sure that we actually show him for who he really is. He does this whole court jester thing. He'll get in front of the camera, he'll posture himself, and he'll try to say the right thing at the right time and pull on the right person at the right time. But at the end of the day, your officers have murdered 6 people. At the end of the day, over 11 people last year. At the end of the day, no cops have been held accountable. And your policies are secret, and you've been lying to people, telling folks that you can't show the videos because you need the parents' permission. Actually, it's the police chief's prerogative to release the video if he wants it released. That's what the truth is. He does not have to get permission, which is why if an officer gets exonerated, they miraculously release the video after the fact, and that's why you always have protests after an officer gets acquitted. Because we forget those 4 officers might be charged, but they still got to get indicted, right? They still got to get true billed before they can go sit in front of a judge and jury.
Right.
And if we don't make it past that point, what justice are we really getting besides making sure that we change the laws? But making sure also that how about we protect what we're trying to do as well? And that's what I'm getting from all of this. When I see him, he's keep making this argument, well, we need to make change on a national level. Bro, all politics are local. You can't do nationally if you're not taking care of home and you won't address anything going on in your own house. You can paint your walls as many times as you want, but if you got a dead body inside the wall, it's going to smell.
Yeah. I think what's interesting to me about that whole dialogue and discussion is this focus on George and what's happened. And I don't want to demean the murder of George Floyd, but it's been used almost as a red herring. It's been used as a lizard's tail. It's almost a distraction now. And so you have these policing agencies like the city of New York, which had a long history of abusing people of color. And I'm sitting there going, okay, y'all gonna kneel with the protesters? All right, that's a wonderful gesture. But I'm like, what difference does that make? Like, you all have been killing people around this country. Stop acting like the Minneapolis Police Department is the only one who's ever killed people. No, our brothers and sisters have been killed around the country. This movement has been so powerful across gender lines, across racial lines. I've never seen so many white people wearing Black Lives Matters shirt and carrying Black Lives Matter sign. From your perspective, there was a couple of things that were said. One was, this movement has been so organic that there is no leader, quote unquote, to call and say, hey, what can we do to solve this? The benefit and the blessing is there's no one leader, so you can't take out one leader. but it's also a challenge. And when I heard Michael Freeman, the DA of Hennepin County, at his first press conference say they called Reverend Jesse Jackson to come in, I started laughing. I mean, literally, I was like, do you know, like everybody out there will probably have to Google Jesse to even know who he used to be. I mean, I was just like, wow, are you that out of touch? Yeah, go ahead, man.
So here's the thing. I think that people miss that a lot of the Black Lives Matter chapters, we're decentralized for a reason. A lot of people miss that there was a time all of us were doing different things. I started my activist work in Houston in 2008 after recovering with my family for the first 3 years of being here since 2005. And there was one thing that I picked up on is that organization always has to be internal. Meaning a lot of what you might see from me on social media or even in the press or even talking right now, I'm only telling you 5% of the 100%. Meaning we have been organizing in such a way that has affected presidential platforms. It was us in 2015 that disrupted Bernie Sanders and Mike O'Malley at a Netroots conference and forced every single presidential candidate on the Democratic side to offer up a criminal justice platform. Did we not? We were a part of those campaigns. We shaped those policies. We have been shaping policies at every level of government in the Black Lives Matter movement and which way we can. For example, I go to the Texas legislature every session and work on bills, some that pass, some that don't. When I go in front of the commissioner's court, I go and work on things with Rodney Ellis or with Lena Hidalgo, that there are things that are important that need to happen to make sure that Black people specifically are able to have an increased quality of life. And that's always been the goal. But also to make sure that when things happen, like with Hurricane Harvey, you mentioned in my biography, we got out there just like all the other people got out there. It was all of us in Houston getting out there to help everybody else. We were helping each other. We were able to put people in hotels. We were able to, some of our members helped to start and become part of boards like with West Street Recovery that helped to continue to recovery efforts. Because, there are still people who are affected by Harvey that didn't get a dime. There's still people by Harvey who are still starving, right? Affected by Harvey who are still starving. And when you think about all of those things that they don't talk about, they only see us when we're protesting, and then they always wonder, well, what did they do any other time? Well, while you was asking what we was doing, we were passing out $25 gift cards to people who needed food during this pandemic and passing out PPE and masks, to the point that Letitia Plummer and people like David Robinson have donated masks to us, and we've been able to disseminate them. That's how we were able to have masks at our protests. We understand it's about protecting Black life while uplifting Black life. You can do two things at once.
Yeah.
And it's very annoying and disheartening when they call people like Jesse Jackson as if you need this one charismatic leader, right? Which is why you haven't seen me talking much to a lot of people, because I am not the face of this movement. I'm a part of this movement. I'm just more vocal than other people, and you might see me more often than other people because I really don't care about what people's opinions are of me because I've been on the street since I was 15 years old. I was homeless at 14, 15 years old, and it took people in community and chosen family to help me get to where I am today. So this is not just about me. It never was. It was always about us. And if you're talking to any activist worth their salt, they should be able to tell you the same thing.
Yeah. It's interesting that you it's interesting that you say that, because like I said, when I heard about the Jesse Jackson, deal, I was like, man, you are like so out of touch. It's scary. What do you say to the people, because there's still some, and I'll reserve my opinion, I want to hear what you have to say, who say, well, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. I know you get that all the time. And what was interesting, in the spirit of full disclosure to my listening audience, or Sunday, I did a Psalm of Lament. I'm in this series, and it's clear to me the series needed to be interrupted, right? Because I'm at a place emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I'm dealing with the global grief of COVID-19, and now just the piling on of grief and anger and frustration and fear. I had a moment last Thursday, the 28th. I have a new grandson. I thought about myself. I thought about my two sons. I thought about my new grandson. And Ashton, I had this moment, man, where I was afraid to leave the house. I mean, because I saw myself under that cop's knee. And I've had moments and situations that were going one way here in Houston, and a cop recognized my name, or somebody in the car recognized, or they called or something, and then the conversation shifted. And I caught the shift, man, in the atmosphere. You know, I mean, it's the difference of me walking around in a sweatshirt and jeans or a hoodie, or me walking around with a suit and tie on, right? Like I have felt it, I've seen it, I've experienced it. And so, you know, it was like, man, at that point, I literally was petrified. I mean, and I'm still dealing with it. I mean, I was driving my wife to the doctor, and it's like, I'm looking around, man, and I'm, 10 and 2, and there's no cop in sight, but I just have that inherent fear. And my dad was a police officer. That's the crazy part. Like, but I'm like, man, this is like crazy. I mean, this is insane. And to your point, I know I'm one step away. What is the most exciting thing about what you're seeing going on around the country for you? As you see these various groups rising up, and I'm not talking about the looters, I'm not talking about the infiltrators, I'm talking about the mobilization of the most articulate generation that this world has ever produced. What is exciting to you about what you're seeing?
It's exciting because people are now starting to find out how organized we really are. We've been preparing for this moment for 5 years. People don't even realize it. We've been training white people. Let me tell you something. Chief Finna yelled across to me. He said, Ashton, how you get all these white people at your protest? I'm pretty sure you've asked that question too, right?
Hey, man,
you want to know why? Because it's white people's responsibility to show up and challenge racism so black people can go live and thrive. It's easier for white people to take off from work. It's easier for white people to show up and go somewhere without having to leave their minimum wage job or worrying about if they can afford the babysitter or the dollar menu to feed their children. There's a difference. It's called using your white privilege and your financial privilege to help folks, right? Which is what we've been teaching people. We do anti-racist training. We work with this group called Surge HTX, which is called Showing Up for Racial Justice, and Indivisible Houston, that kind of came about with the election of Donald Trump. People forget that in 2016, a whole new group of people were activated. People forget that in 2017, activists were activated. The March for Our Lives groups that we work with. People don't understand that we built an entire network of people who are fighting anti-racism as a normal thing. And the reason why you see white people at protests standing in front of black people and blocking the police from their hits is because they were trained to do so by us, by activists across this country. You know, when y'all watch these movies and they do those anti-racism trainings and all this other stuff, guess who's still doing that? Guess who made time to do that? We weren't just sitting on our asses doing nothing. So when you see white people doing certain stuff, it's because black folk got in their face, didn't worry about their tears. You know, you crying, but we've been made to adjust and automate and find ways to innovate for our lives for over 400 years to adjust to whatever oppressions that we're going through. We've always had to live on the fly and on the curve, regardless of what our financial standing or our education is, because we're black. And those adjustments always happen, that adapting. White people don't know what it's like to be poor, and the poor white people don't know what it's like to be real poor, right? You know, like you could be Charlie Trash shit, but I bet you could still make more than Danny who has a degree.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like these life chances is what I've been talking about. The whole conversation is something that we talk about. So when you think about how activists get paid now versus back in the day, we make it so that when you take an activist from the street from doing their work, because I don't get paid for this. A lot of us don't get paid for this. But if you want me to come and speak at your university for 45 minutes, you want me to get on a plane and fly out to your school, to your conference, to your trainings, you're going to pay me. That's labor. And anything that a black person does is labor. Anytime white people or non-black people of color challenge black people to teach them about what's racism and what's not, that is labor. Everything that we do is labor. And we are now starting to come to that place where when you see the organization that we have in the different cities that are protesting, even with the spontaneous ones. For example, a lot of the protests that I did not attend because I had heat exhaustion last week, and I had to spend time recovering and getting sleep because I had just been going and going and going before the George Floyd situation popped up. So this was just stacked right on top of all the other things for me. And so the thing that I never had, and you saw me come up as an activist, the thing that I never had was people who knew how to set up a bail fund, a general fund, have people on standby to be legal observers, attorneys for people who get arrested, and street medics for people who might get tear gas. The people who carry around the milk. The reason why we carry milks at protests because it's not a big secret. It neutralizes the pepper spray and the tear gas. Think about that for a second. We think about these things and we perfect them over time with each incident as they come. Because if you go and look at the pictures of the protests, you will see officers in militarized riot gear taking the milk at gunpoint from protesters because they see that as a threat. They see us as a threat because we know how to organize, which is why they like to put on their plane. They send out their plainclothes officers to agitate when they can't get us to do it. Right. And then also when you think about what I see, what I'm excited about is that people are correcting folks about what a peaceful protest is. I don't give a damn if you call it a riot. I don't give a damn if you call it a protest. Who gave you your definition of peaceful? Because the same thing y'all keep misquoting Dr. King and taking him out of context and all this other good stuff. Like, think about for a second how many times he got bashed over a head with a billy club. Think about how many times he sat in jail and had people talking down on him just like y'all are doing us right now, but you are using his name in vain to attack us. And most likely, if he were alive, he would be encouraging us to do what we're doing. Because there's nothing different about what happened in the 1960s or any other era, right? And also, I thought about Kwame Stokely Carmichael during the situation when I saw all 50 states having protests in towns small and large and cities big and small, is that integration wasn't for black people. It was for white people. Those laws was for white people to tell us what they can't do to black people. Those laws were for institutions to treat black people equally so that we had access to the same books, the same type of water supply, the same sources of energy. Black folks were pretty self-sufficient back then. And there was nothing wrong with moving into white neighborhoods because you're coming up, but we assimilated too much. We acculturated ourselves too much into white gaze thinking, G-A-Z-E. And so with that came respectability politics. With that came the whole you carry yourself like this and you speak like that and you walk like this and you do this, that, and the other. But people don't seem to not understand that does not save you from the bullet of a cop, let alone your child from the ire of a teacher who just moved in from Vider that drives from Vider to teach your child every day in HISD, right? And you put those things into perspective, I'm saying critical mass is really what the answer is. But what I want to see after this is people showing up into their elected officials' offices, into their phone calls and their emails and saying, listen, we need change right now. You said you was going to do this. Let me remind you, this is what you got coming up. How can we help you if you support us? And if you don't, remember, we still got to elect you again.
So, Ashton, help us. And I don't want to speak for everybody in my generation. I'm 58, and I've been fighting for those who were in front of me, fighting those who are in front of me generationally, because I'm a child of the 60s, born in the 60s. So I really have been the beneficiary of the sacrifices that have been made.
Right.
But my father, even though he was a police officer, raised me with a sense of consciousness and always told me that I was a black man and told me his stories of dealing with racism on the job and told me the officers that were doing the things that needed or didn't need to be done and ended up testifying against them and had to leave the police force because he took a stand.
Right.
Tell me, what we can do to help you, because you all are in essence the grandchildren of that protest generation. And we, my age, my generation, we moved into the lands out of the hood, but we're still niggas. But we haven't learned how to fight. We're literally a generation of zoo raised lions, right?
Yeah.
We haven't had to hunt, you know, we're waiting to be fed, you know, we haven't had to fight. And I'm like, man, come on, y'all, we got to do something. And so I'm excited, man, to see the energy and what you all are doing. What can those of us who are of that generation above you all do to support what you're doing? Because I've said this to young people. For example, a group of young people wanted to run for leadership in the NAACP in Houston. I know you're aware of that, right? Mm-hmm. And they came to me and asked me, and I said, I don't even know why you're fooling with them. I mean, man, start your own thing. Like, because at the end of the day, you don't need us to co-sign on what you want to do.
Right.
And if you become part of our organization, I heard Dr. George Carr on Roland Martin Unfiltered talk about the whole movement of SNCC and how they wanted to move all of those young people into the SCLC youth division and create a youth division in the NAACP. And they were like, no, we're going to do our own thing. Yeah. And that's what I see again happening. But how can we help and support those who have a consciousness, those who have a platform? What can we do to help support this movement when we haven't been fighting our entire lives?
There are two things. First and foremost, this conversation is it right here. You know, we don't see each other a lot, but every time we come into the same space, whether we're like in person or on the phone, we have a relationship that we communicate with each other. And there's times we sat in a room, looked at each other and started laughing.
Right.
Just because we have a connection. And the connection that needs to be honored is that, one, I can't just look at you as an elder. I also have to look at you as an equal, as somebody I can go to who has the lived experience on how things happened before I was able to speak for myself within the community standards that we have today, right? And so what I'm saying is I think that it's really good for the mental health piece to hear from people, from like a lot of people, including yourself, have contacted me. That honestly is what has been keeping me sane. So, hey, what do you need? Hey, why don't you come over and have some dinner with me? Let's talk on the phone for a little bit. And then let me ask you what you need and what you need help with. Do you need any advice on anything? Just offer it up, because there's many times I've asked people to mentor me over the years, and I would call them and I said, well, I'll call you back and I'll do this. And then you never find them. And then when they actually come at you to tell you something that they might disagree with, it's hard to hear them, because when you reach out and you don't get that pullback, that's where the disconnect happens.
Yeah,
it's not always just the whole, you know, certain people are coming off as preachy or something like that. It could be a myriad of issues along the spectrum in terms of how the disconnect works. The other thing is making sure that, okay, if you can't come to the protest, send some bottled water, right? Or help organize something. Like, for example, if you phone bank for your favorite candidate, you know, Letitia Plummer is trying to pass a budget measure under Campaign Zero, 8 for 8, which is partially working to defund HPD. That's going to be coming off a vote next week. And what people could be doing is looking at the Facebook post on her page or on my page and calling every single city council member or emailing every single city council member saying, we need to do something about these police officers and the leeway that they have. We need to make sure the policies are just and fair. We need to make sure that when we're spending money, we're spending it fairly as well, and not just over budgeting for police that we don't need. You know, there's a number of ways that we can do it, but it's always about ask me what I need. Right. Yeah. And that's what it comes from, because I'll ask for what I need. I won't ask for what I want. I'll ask for what I need. And if we meet somewhere in between and I get something I want out of the deal, that works too. And usually the want is friendship and someone you can talk to who can relate to the issues that you might be facing today that they might have actually experienced right? That was, that there were years that went by, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where there were multiple incidences of police brutality and racism, for example, like what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. And so with those lived experiences, we can't let that die with y'all. Those are stories that we have to carry with us, because those are lessons about how to deal with all of this.
Yeah.
And, that's passing the torch.
Yeah. I think what's interesting to me about what you just said, and something you mentioned earlier. So I've had a number of white pastors who have contacted me. Interestingly enough, never concerned before. Now, Will Smith has said, racism is not new. The filming of it is new, and we're seeing images that we didn't see before. And so now they're like, man, what do I need to do? And so I gave a group 3 things that I want them to do. And I want you to comment on the last one. I told them, number 1, we need to come up with and have an understanding of a scientific definition of racism. If you see affirmative action as reverse racism, then I submit to you, you don't know the definition of racism, right? We really have to understand what racism is. Number 2, and just as important for a Christian or person of faith, do you see racism as sin? Because if you don't see anything wrong with it, then as a church person, as a spiritual person, you're not going to address it the way it needs to be addressed. And that's combative and eradicate it, because you don't want it going on. And you typically have, quote unquote, I'm air quoting now for those of you who can't see me, your pet sins, which are typically the ones you don't commit or the ones you don't do, right? And they're somebody else's issue, instead of owning racism as a sin. And then the third thing I shared with them is, white people always want to proclaim that they are not a racist. Amy Cooper, was quick in her apology to Chris Cooper to say, man, I apologize for what happened and I'm not a racist. And it's like, okay, I don't know if you think you're a racist or not, but you definitely have some racist overtones. So my challenge to these church leaders has been, are you willing to be an anti-racist? Because that to me is the key, right? I don't care if you're a racist or not, as much as are you willing or unwilling to be an anti-racist? You mentioned that earlier, and I want you to take some time just to amplify that for our audience. What does that mean? What does that look like as you think about it?
Anti-racism is recognizing that saying that you don't see color is wrong. Anti-racism is recognizing that you have privileges that allow you to be in spaces that we can't be in without being questioned. So when we're talking about that type of issue, when you boil it down, at the end of the day, it's more or less about creating space for Black people. White people are used to being told yes all the time. They're not used to being told no. And that's why they touch our hair. That's why they invade our space. That's why they try to touch our beards. That's why they think they can ask questions. When white people started trying me after they found out that I was an activist and they wanted to work with me, well, Ashton, I want to ask you a question. And you want what? It's, can you ask me a question? May I ask you? And if I think about it, I might. But knowing that we have personal autonomy and that autonomy being respected is what white people should be doing. When we're talking about anti-racism, we're also talking about self-checking at all times. It's just no different from being a male, being respectful of a woman and her personal autonomy. And when she says no, and respecting when she says yes, right? It's always about making sure that we're respecting people's space. If white people don't understand what it's like to have their space invaded, then it's up to us to say, well, this is what you're doing. If you deny that you're doing this, then you are being willfully ignorant. So when people say, oh, I'm not being racist, well, you knew what you was doing. You knew exactly what you was doing because your macroaggressions expressed it. You said it online. You might have made a comment and then you think you're sorry about it because you feel bad about it because you're more worried about being called a racist than actually being exposed for your said racism that you're wishing to deny. There are more people who get offended for being called a racist than get offended for actually being called out on said racism. I know that doesn't make any sense right now, but I'm pretty sure you get where I'm going with this.
Sure.
So it's like when we talk about the concept of white tears, this is what we're talking about. When you come into my space and you come crying trying to say, well, I want to talk about how I felt about when such and such died and I'm just so distraught. Well, this ain't about you, sis. So you need to sit down and listen to Black people so you can understand and identify when we need help. The job of a white person and a non-Black person of color, for example, because they ain't exempt from this either, right? Because Tony could be my friend, but his abuela could be racist as all get out. You get up and where I'm going with this? So at the end of the day, people have to understand that there's boundaries, there's respect, and there's space. And if you violate any of those, we need to put you through some anti-racism training, or we just need to call you out and you just need to move on and go be back with the clusters of white people that you're used to being with, right? Because when you're messing with Black people who are actually trained, right? When we talk about the technical definition of racism, my major in college was sociology. And when we think about how people use the argument of thugs and black on black crime is a racist trope. It's not even a sociological term. It's not even an academic term. It's something they came up with to further criminalize black skin. Right? Because it's interracial crime, and statistically, white people kill more white people at a much higher rate than Black people kill Black people. So while we still have to address intraracial violence, we also must understand that we might be allowing them to cast us as more violent than what we really are. And that contributes to the argument of being seen as less than human. And think about this for a second. It permeates the medical field. They experimented on us. You know, they made this distrust happen. So all of the distrust that we might have for white people as a collective or on an individual basis is based on our lived experience, which is why I said we need to stop treating Blackness and Black lived experiences as anecdotal. Because I can talk about being angry about the Black trans woman that was beat up at a protest for showing up to support her Blackness and being just as angry about George Floyd being murdered, right? Or how we overgloss when Black women get murdered. Breonna Taylor, right? So when we're talking about police brutality and all of its ugliness, we're also talking about the larger point of systemic and institutional racism that white people need to acknowledge before they call themselves allies, and that they need to acknowledge their role and how they're playing it. And then when we get ready to do something, for example, when we events that we have, there events that we haven't had to pay for anything, because the city requires you to have sound permits. They require you to have all kinds of permits for doing certain things. Well, we've never had to pay for that because white people are like, look, you know what, we got it, because they're now coming around to this understanding of, let me do this, let me use some of my privilege to get you into this space, and then you go speak. That's what creating spaces is for those who are listening and they happen to be white. So if you call yourself an ally without a Black person calling you that, then what does that make you? Not a damn ally, because you really don't know what we need because you haven't asked. And you're not listening either because you're telling us how you think that we should organize. This language of peaceful protest and violence, those are microaggressions that are angled at Black protesters specifically, when we're really just expressing our anger and making them uncomfortable because we're not using their respectability politics. That's what it really boils down to.
Yeah. I was watching the protesters outside of the White House just before the president made his jaunt down to stand in front of the church and awkwardly hold the Bible. And it was sickening to see. And it was interesting to hear the reporters who were saying how peaceful the protesters were. You had a number of white people who were on the front line, not Black people. And one of the comments that they made was, I wonder why the president is coming out to do this in the out of the Oval Office. Why is he coming into the Rose Garden? Is he coming out to agitate? What is his purpose for doing that? And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose, right? They start shooting tear gas, and they
went on a media blackout like they've been doing here in Houston and not showing what's really been happening. What they did was they cut cell service and electricity in that part of Washington, D.C. I know because everybody I knew tweet stopped. Like there was a blackout. And then not only that, the items that were used to disperse the protesters were actually unconstitutional and illegal. This man violated the Constitution. He committed an impeachable offense. And he threatened people's lives because that was CDC grade weapons, meaning they're only supposed to be used in war on foreign soil, not on American citizens. So when we're talking about him holding that Bible at the church, let's talk about it and be about it, right? That man needs to be roasted on the damn spit. I have so much hate in my heart for him, and I don't hate nobody. But if given the opportunity and we was in a different world in a dystopian future, and this was Hunger Games, and I had a bow and arrow.
All right. So I'll tell you what, Ashton, I had a question for you to close on, and that is, what would you say if you could have a meeting with the president?
I would.
If he said, "Hey, man, I you know what, I'm trying to figure this out," and the reason I'm saying that is because I've gotten word and I've heard that he's trying to reach out to somebody, not that he's necessarily going to listen to him, but because this thing is so out of control and they cannot wrap their arms around it, and his threats are just fueling the protesters and those who are fighting for the rights of all people.
Right.
He doesn't know what to do. And so it's like, oh man, I need to talk. So if he said, "Hey, Ashton Woods, man, I want to talk to you. I understand that you're a Black Lives Matter activist. Help me out." What would you say to him?
I would say, you made this bed, not lay in it. He created this atmosphere when he started running for office. He created this atmosphere with the good people on both sides. He created this atmosphere. This is the bed of his own making. And so I would never meet with him because I don't negotiate with terrorists.
Okay. Interesting perspective. Well, let me ask you this. Who would you meet with in his administration? I mean, how would you give him direction, I guess, is my question, in terms of dismantling this and solving the problem, or trying to move to a solution?
If he really wanted to do what you're saying that he would be asking to do, he already has the directives at his hands because Barack Obama was already doing that. Even though he had done and said some things that I disagree with when it came to criminal justice reform, at least he took effort. He made the effort to put people in and create policies. There are executive orders that he still hasn't rescinded, Donald Trump, that he could use. And also, he could also just stop the demilitarization of the police. HPD has tanks. For what?
Right.
I mean, so the whole concept of and the idea of me speaking to anybody within in that administration is problematic for me for two reasons. Because I know it's going to go in one ear and out the other, and most likely they already know what I'm going to say because they've been monitoring activists this whole time.
Yeah.
So what else could I tell him except for to go screw himself? He made it. He needs to lay in it. Period.
If you're just tuning in, you just missed a tremendous episode of Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield. I tell you what, I'm going to let you go on the air right now so that we can get out of the way for our next program. But I'm going to keep Ashton Woods. We're going to do a little Real World, Real Talk after party, because I want to ask Ashton really about the interrelatedness of all that he does as an activist. Regardless of what you feel or what you say, people are marginalized in this country for every reason except their character and who they are as people. And we're going to talk about that now. So let me say peace out to everybody who's been listening. The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And man, there's some good fights to get started in our society today. Until next time, peace. Listen, you can join me on Facebook Live. You can join me on Instagram, Twitter, Periscope. We're going to keep this conversation going. All right. Thank you all. Peace out.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real World, Real Talk. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes every week. Follow us via social media using the @RWRTDZ username on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To submit any comments, questions, sponsor opportunities, or future show suggestions, Visit us online at rwrtdz.com or via email at info@rwrtdz.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've been inspired to be the change you want to see in the world today. Until next time, be real, keep it real, and stay real.
All right, Ashton, let's keep going, man, because I'm feeling this, brother. So tell me, let's talk about the interrelatedness of what you do, because one of the things that I think happens, and it's understandable. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's understandable. We become very myopic in our pain. So I'm looking at, I'm Black, and you start talking about immigration, and I'm like, man, look here, I ain't got time for no immigrant. I'm fighting every day as a Black man.
Reggae hut. If you eat at Reggae Hut, you shouldn't be saying that though. If you're gonna eat at Reggae Hut, you shouldn't be saying that, because there are Black undocumented people, right? There are Black immigrants. There are people who come from the continent of Africa and everywhere else in between, because people forget colonization wasn't just in the United States. It was everywhere. There are Black people on every inhabited part of this world, and each of them deal with the same issues that we deal with in varying degrees. And so when we connect issues, for example, a lot of people know that I'm out and gay. There are people who disagree with that. But the thing is when we're talking about personal autonomy, does it matter that you disagree? Because I didn't know that you birthed me from your body, because my own mother doesn't even control my own personal autonomy. I do. I'm a grown human, right? And just recognize that if you've been wondering why your little Black children who are now grown, successful adults don't show up to your house when you call them, it's because maybe you've been saying and doing things that make them hurt, right? And so the whole concept of chosen family in that sense, when we might come or we leave real fast, that's probably because you're saying or doing something that's triggering us, right? And so when we're connecting dots about those kind of issues, we're talking about how within our Black community we must hold ourselves accountable with the way we treat each other, right? In the context that when we're talking about racism, so if I went to there are people who are like me in the LGBTQ community that are working minimum wage jobs, just like everybody else using a bus. But we show up in March because you realize a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement, most of the people who are on the forefront are actually women and LGBT people. And a lot of people don't realize that. And when we hear you say some of the things, not you, but when we hear people say some of the things they say, we turn around and get questioned by our chosen family, because they say, well, how can you fight for them? They don't like you. They'd kill you if they had the chance. It's because people look like me. It has nothing to do with me being gay. We can talk about you disrespecting my sexual orientation in a different platform, but remember that I'm still Black. It doesn't make me less Black. It doesn't make me richer. And no, the depictions you see on TV, not every Black gay person winds up with a white person. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with interracial relationships. What I'm saying is that how we've been depicted is all kinds of wrong in any arena, whether you are in a situation where you're dealing with mental health as a Black person overall, when you're dealing with financial strife, when you're dealing with healthcare access altogether, we're all in the same boat. But then some of us, when we seek healthcare, for example, if you're a trans person and you see healthcare, you get discriminated against. There are officers out there right now who would not aid me if I told them I had HIV, even though they don't realize that if I cut myself in the air hit it would die instantly on contact with the air. And that people are more dangerous to me than I am more than to them, because I have a compromised immune system, right? I can be healthier than most people, but if you running around with the nasty sneezes and not covering your mouth, yes, you are a threat to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when we're talking about putting things into perspective, I'm using my own personal anecdotes as my story, but there are other people who have their own stories that they live through their experience, whether whatever vectors there are, whether it be gender or gender identity or sexual orientation or sex. The issue is when we connect the dots, we have to talk about how we're all being affected by the same thing while giving people the space and the platform to be able to speak for themselves. Because not all Black people are created equal. And the overused phrase, blackness is not a monolith, meaning we ain't all built the same. All black people don't go to church. Not all black people are Christians. Not all black people are Muslim, right? There are black Jews, there are black atheists. We exist across every realm that you could think of. And because of that, a lot of times the overarching view of blackness, because it's as it's shaped by media and how we do things, it tends to erase some folks. And so we're connecting those dots. That's why I do the work that I do, to bring in the whole, I did that. I'm on the phone with somebody who is an ecumenical Christian leader, and I am a secular humanist, which means that I'm an atheist. But in humanism sense, I believe in the people. I believe in the people who look like me. I believe in working with people to make sure that when that religious, when their right to believe in something is being violated, and if you're Muslim or Jewish and you're being discriminated against, I believe that is a problem, right? I believe you should have the right to worship, just like I have the right to not worship. Is what I'm saying. This is what allyship really looks like. So when the conversations have to happen, people have to unlearn the idea of agreement as permission. Because a lot of black folk think they have dominion over people who are LGBT or woman, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, because they see us as beneath them. And that's a microaggression, whether they know it or not. Because you're saying you don't like this and that, and because of that, you might shape it into a law, which means you're taking away my personal autonomy. But we're the first people to show up when your ass gets shot. And that's what a problem is.
Wow. So let me ask you this, because I think that's a great statement. Don't confuse agreement with permission. As you are thinking about your own life and your own journey, one of the things that surprised me, and I guess I'd never thought about it, was the layers of racism, even within the subsets and groups that Black GLBTQ people,
they racist
are discriminated against, even within that chosen family, by white LGBTQ people. And it's like, and I was like, really? And then that Black gay people or Black deaf people are discriminated against by white deaf people. And I was like, wow, I guess I never thought about it like this.
A white person is a white person. Is always going to be a white person, whether they're working on their racism or not. A white person is inherently racist until they work on what they're going to work on. And just like when we have to deal with the issues of colorism within our community, Black people cannot be racist. They can be prejudiced. We do not own the construct of racism. We did not create it. It was created to benefit white people. Now, for those Black folk who have assimilated into whiteness and found ways to be like Candace Owens or Uncle Ruckus, for example, a fictional character, you will know that we have been taught through different forms of media, and no matter how we look at it, whether it's a book, whether it's on TV, whether it's online or a message or a text message, we are taught to view ourselves as less than. And because of that, people get leeway in how they look at us and how they treat us. And when they're confronted with people like us who are like, nah, I don't know who you're talking to, but we're going to fix this right now. And if we don't fix this, either you're going to go or I'm going to go. Or like my friends will say, don't let Trump get your ass whipped.
I got you.
Yeah.
That's it's something, man. I tell you what, this is for me, even in ministry, the most exciting time to be alive. I mean, just to see what's happening in this country, and I think I'm excited about the opportunity.
This praxis.
Yeah, to see to see this thing come about, and I love thinking strategically. Okay, what are some changes? What are things that need to be done? Because I think my generation, to be perfectly honest with you, has been asleep at the wheel, and we have seen legislative moves done, and we're still marching And meanwhile, folk like police unions were going to legislators and they were passing laws so that it didn't matter if you had a black mayor. It didn't matter if you had a black police chief. All of those things that mattered when we were kids, now we're seeing those people in position, but that systemic racism has now gone to the next level. And so I use the analogy, we busy boxing and they doing mixed martial arts and we getting our behinds kicked and we don't understand why this person got fired, but now they're back on the force, or how they got fired over here, but they're in this neighboring city now working on the police department.
But you know what though? There are a whole lot more spooks who sat by the door than there were in the 70s.
Explain that.
Have you ever seen the movie The Spook That Sat by the Door?
No.
Have you ever read the book?
Nope.
It's about this black man who joined the FBI and decided to quit and go back to Chicago and train his people. And then he went to different cities that were predominantly black and trained those people. And they started taking over the police departments and fighting the U.S. Army. And the Army could not fight them back because they used the idea of guerrilla warfare within the cities. Because, you know, white people don't come to black neighborhoods. So if you're going to come play with us on our turf, well, friend, let's have fun. I'm not saying that I'm encouraging that kind of thing. What I'm saying is you never know who's listening and who's passing information along to who.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing, because what we know, if we took the combined knowledge of every activist, regardless of age, and sat it on a book and we all wrote into it, it would literally be like a spell book. It would literally be like, if you were a Christian, it would literally be a book of prayers. It would literally be a spell book. It would be a book of advice. It would be like magic, because every single word that would be written, even if some of it is contradictory, guess what it would teach us? It would be like a handbook on how to deal with white people when it comes for us once and for all. Because your president is talking about activating militaries and invoking posse comitatus and doing all these different things to have war on U.S. soil, while selling camouflage MAGA hats and calling it hashtag Trump Army. And you wonder why they didn't get rid of the gun show loopholes and all these other things. So my best advice to black people is arm up. Go to the shooting range, train, learn self-defense. I'm not telling you that something violent is coming, but I'm telling you, you better be ready. Because it's going to be us or them. I know they don't like that argument, but it's truth.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think we see him pushing and pushing. It appears that he's pushing us towards a race war.
He's not pushing us towards a race war. His minions are. All he is a talking head. He doesn't know his face from his own ass half the day. So really, to be honest with you, what really is happening is the Trumps in our backyard that we really have to watch. The Trumps in our backyard was there before Trump even got into office, and they celebrated when he got in because they helped him get there, because they used the various means and methods to violate our voting rights and to take over our legislatures to make it easier for him to do what he's doing right now.
Yeah.
If you get rid of those people, vote them out or hold them accountable, things might look a lot different, but we don't look at the Trumps in our backyard. And those are the people that are dangerous. Say, for example, Mattress Mac. Mattress Mac is a good guy in the context that he always shows up when Houston needs it most. But he's also a staunch Tea Partier. He's given to some of the most racist, vile people. After folks come and get their furniture delivered the same day, little do they know that money was going to the Trump campaign. The same Trump who came to Houston with his wife, or to San Antonio after Harvey and wore a jacket that said, "I don't care, do you?" These are the same people. Don't confuse that kindness as absolution and absolving them from their racism.
Yeah. Okay, I want to shift a little bit. Let's talk about the election. I'm a firm believer. Joe Biden has stated publicly he is going to have a woman as his running mate, and Black women have said, hey, we are the heartbeat, the backbone of the Democratic Party. She better be a sister. I'm a firm believer that if he picks a Black woman as his running mate, he will not win, because I don't think white women will support a Black woman being an eyelash away from the presidency before they get there. And white people have always voted against their best interests if they can keep black people down. I think it's going to be a damaging move, because I don't think white women, the same white women who came out and say, oh, we repent, we should have voted for Hillary. Listen, they've survived 4 years with Trump, and I think they're going to vote for Trump if he names a black woman as his running mate.
You're talking about the 50% of white women who voted for Trump in 2016. You're talking about them. So here's the thing. In the time from 2015 all the way to now, how many high school graduations have there been so far? Thousands, right?
Yeah.
There's a whole new group. We forget the March for Our Lives children. We forget the Black Lives Matter movement, right? You think about that in context. I ran for office, remember?
You did.
And I got close. Why did I get close? Because people knew who the hell I was and knew that I wasn't going to talk any shit. I was just going to say what needed to be said, what I can do, instead of telling people what they want to hear. So the truth of the matter is, when we're talking about that, and I guess within context, it's kind of hard to dissect. Because when you think about it, it's a mixed bag. And that's, I guess, why it's hard for me to go into detail about that. You know, like give me something more specific to work off of.
Well, no, I think
white women. You're saying white women won't. You're saying white women won't vote for black women, but I actually agree and disagree. I think it's a mixture of both. That's really what what was formulating in my mind in that context, is that I think there are a lot of people who are white and woman, or white and male, who would vote for Joe Biden just to get Trump out, regardless of who the vice presidential candidate was. I really think that there's some people who are full of desperation and full of remorse, but also now they're being affected by this too. Let's not forget. It ain't just about them protecting black lives and brown lives. It's also about protecting their bottom line. And if their bottom line has been hurt by Trump, it won't matter who the VP nominee is for Joe Biden. The bigger issue is getting black people to show up to vote for Joe Biden, who now live in a world where people don't understand that we now vet folks. We can look up stuff, right? Like when I tell people, there was this guy posted on Facebook, black guy, well, what does Black Lives Matter do? And I'm thinking to myself, a simple Google search will do that for you in your own municipality. People only look for what will fit their narrative as opposed to the objective facts. And that's what the issue is we're facing with Joe Biden. A lot of us didn't want Joe Biden because of the crime bill, because of what he did back when the Clarence Thomas saga started off with the sexual harassment. When we're talking about all of the things, the underhanded things that people do, coupled with the fact that we tired of seeing old white men in office and old white men in general, right? And we're tired of seeing white women too, to some extent, or the wrong white women. It's time for black leadership. And you think about what our city council looks like. Our demographic has more black women on city council in history than ever before. Right here in Houston. Our courts, our different levels of elected office are pushing white men out, right? And you think about that for a second. So when we're talking about the larger picture, I guess from electoral speak, because I've worked on many elections, as you know, for different candidates, I got to eat, right? So I'm a data person. I'm going to look at the data and see what it says. And the proof is in the pudding. When people win their elections, 2/3 of them are going to be like, okay, well, these are the issues that are my issues. And if you're addressing my issues, then I'm going to vote for you. And then there's another section of the group who are probably louder and more vocal, which is probably what I'm a part of. We're more learned. We're researching. Because all we do is policy. All we do is make sure that we're shaping things. So when we see things in people's platforms that say A, B, C, D, and E, but it doesn't match up with my A, B, C, D, and E because I know, because I was there in the room when it was being written, that says something to you. And that's when we start telling people to start paying more attention. So the divide between millennials like myself and folks who are Gen Xers and boomers that voted for Biden is we feel like y'all f***ed us. We feel like y'all put us, y'all f***ed us We feel like now we're going to have to clean up even more trash from people being comfortable in the 70s, 80s, and 90s with their integration, and now having to fend for ourselves and having to learn to be the hunters again because we weren't taught how to hunt, like you brought up earlier, right? That's why you see in some parts, seeing a plantation where, you know, there's some well-to-do black people, and then in some parts that were nice neighborhoods, black neighborhoods, you didn't teach your child how to take care of your house. You didn't get your child to get on the ladder. You hire people, right? Which is why black people look down on trades today, when actually we should be dominating trades, right? As alternatives to finding work in corporate America through capitalism and so on and so forth. You see what I mean? Like, there are these little pieces that when we connect the dots and we think about, damn, we feel like we gotta wait another 8 years, even if Biden gets in, we're gonna be sitting there twiddling our thumbs trying to get things done. Y'all done went out there and voted. Y'all had your opinion and y'all say, but we're the ones that got to do all the damn work. And this is what we have to work with. And we don't appreciate it. Now, we respect it, but we don't appreciate it. Y'all giving us a situation that is untenable. Our climate is changing. It is disproportionately hurting black people. 30 years from now, Miami and New Orleans will be underwater, and not because of a hurricane. People don't understand that when Barack Obama was in office and Gaddafi was removed from Libya, that war was over water. The Tigris and the Euphrates River are literally drying up. People are dying of thirst in Africa and in the Middle East because the waters are drying up. What do you think is happening here? Think about this for a second. Put it in the context of Flint. Think about the people you're voting for and how it's going to have a larger impact, because your decisions is a life or death decision for somebody else. And whose death sentence did we just sign?
Well, you know, there's an old Jamaican saying that bad times are good times for somebody. And we just got to figure out who's benefiting from the bad times of people. Ashton, as you are thinking about this upcoming election, and I appreciate your thought, because I think you're right. How did you describe them? The children of the march that are coming up. Do you see this crowd that is protesting now mobilized enough to get out to the polls and vote? Do you see them? Are they being taught and trained that is a viable tool to change the world?
I think they already know. I think that they're going to use their discretion on this one. I think that they know what they have to do, and we've all, in some way, shape, or form, come out against Trump on multiple occasions, so we know what we have to do. It don't mean we have to like it. We know what we have to do, but we are angry about this decision. I am livid about having to vote for Joe Biden, to the point that I resent some people. Livid. Because I know what we're not going to get. And I've been fighting for some things to change on a local level. And this just set us back 10 years. All of this. And we have work to do. So to those of you out there who feel like you disagree with me, instead of you being angry about what I'm saying, show up and ask about how you can help and get us to changes, because you put us in the situation, and now it is also your responsibility to help us get through this.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question, and we'll close on this. When will the protests end? There were those who thought, okay, when you arrest the one officer, that is going to ease up. And then there was a lot of criticism about him being charged, what he was charged. Keith Ellison comes in, respected on multiple levels for his legal acumen. He ups the charge and then charges the other 3 officers who participated in the murder of George Floyd. They're arrested. Protests erupt even more. The George Floyd Memorial yesterday, protests erupt even more. I heard about the 2,000 plus kids, literally kids, teenagers in Katy, who got together and started protesting while Ashton was at home, right? But this thing is like, you didn't lead that. You can't blame you for that.
No, I didn't lead it, but I helped them put it together.
Yeah. Okay. So these kids are woke now, right? I mean, it's like.
It doesn't mean that they're woke. It means that they're aware.
Yeah.
Because being woke is one thing. Another thing, awareness means that you're able to take action behind it and put some do something tangible. Being awake and woke means that you're conscious of it, but you ain't gotta do nothing. You can spout out all of the talking points you want. You can talk about how it's a problem. You can talk about how it affects you, but a lot of times those folks generally don't do anything but keyboard jockey.
See, thank you for correcting me. I was using those terms.
No, it wasn't correction. It wasn't correction.
No, I'm cool. Listen, man, I'm good. And listen, I have come to grips with my age, brother. I'm good.
No, that has nothing to do with age. It wasn't correction at all. What I'm saying is this: when we're talking about wokeness, sometimes wokeness can be used to oppress people who look like you.
I got
right?
you.
And so when we're talking about those kind of things within the context of who we are as a people, we know that we emulate whiteness, right? And you've heard me tell people this. I was like, damn, you sound like a white man when you say that.
Yeah.
Like, really insist upon sounding like a white man and coming off like a white man because you want what you want when you want it and how you want it? Or are you going to shut the hell up and check your privilege? It's like, it's as easy as that. And I think that once people start being held more and more accountable for their actions and their words, even those who look like us, I bet you anything that we'll probably be more unified than before, because we'll be able to recognize our differences as good as opposed to something as bad or deviant, because we always try to look cohesive in one unit. But we also have our little individual quirks that make us us and that lend themselves to our talents. Otherwise, we wouldn't be who we are if we were just homogeneous people.
Yeah. When will the protests end in your mind?
They won't. They end when they say we end. You know, when we do. It's not up to me. It's not up to any one person. But until the people feel like they are heard, and until the people feel like they need to stop, this will keep going as long as it needs to happen. And I'll support them.
Greg Popovich, the coach of the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA, issued a statement, and one of the lines in that statement was, in order to begin solving this, the president needs to say 3 simple words: Black Lives Matter. He won't do it, but if he just started there and gave respect to people, it would put us on at least a path to finding a solution. I know it's more than just Black Lives Matter. I understand that. What do you think needs to happen in order to put us on the path from a federal level from 45? What needs to
45? It's really not about 45. It's about Congress. He's only one of 3 branches of government. People forget that his power is not absolute, even though we keep allowing him to act like it is. Like, there are rules that he has to follow, which is why he gets shut up sometimes and he's not allowed to speak at press conferences, because he's been investigated for everything he says and does. So the thing about it is we got to hold our House Speaker, Democrat or Republican, regardless of party affiliation, the House, period, the Senate, accountable and make them start making direct changes about how they need to push things through. We got these stimulus packages, and Nancy Pelosi has gotten what she wants almost every single time. They can create a package that includes some reforms on a national level that not even just reforms, but abolishment of rules and reimagining of how we look at certain things and how we empower law enforcement, right, versus empowering the people. Because we're living in a police state. And what we have to do is abolish the police state. And the concrete steps that have to be taken in order to abolish the police state need to be taken by Congress, while in tandem taking place on state level. Because people keep forgetting that all you need is 30 states to pass the same law, and then it becomes a part of the Constitution. You know, there are formalities with that, but when we keep saying that politics are local, it's very important that we take the majority in the state legislatures, because we can change the rules from that and force it to change on the national level without even requiring that man in the White House to sign off on it. There are ways.
Let's close. Ashton, I want to give you the stage, man. Just say whatever you want to say to our listening audience regarding what's going on. What's on your heart, man? Just take a few minutes, man, and just let us know what's happening and what you're thinking, what you're feeling.
So what's on my heart is that I've been able to catch up on sleep for the first time in like a month. And that's because there are people who think just like us out there, who care about the well-being of Black people, and who have come together to make sure that we were able to have people to assist those who were arrested with food and water, and made sure that they got attorneys. To the people who volunteered to bring water and PPE to the protest, to all the volunteers overall who have helped us in this effort, thank you so much, because we've been able to help so many people through the situation, and we've been able to educate people as well. So if you're out there and you're wondering what you can do, you don't have no money, you don't know what you can do, you might not have time, think about the things that affect you and start writing down how they connect to issues that other people face. And that's how you start your own activism. And when you have the strength or the ability enough to come out and start speaking up for yourself, or being in rooms where decisions are made, and you're ready, let's go. Because we need people 6 months from now, not just last week, not just today, but every day. Because the changes that we're demanding, the abolishment that we're demanding, the reforms that we're demanding, have to be protected even when those elected officials who passed it are gone. Even when we might be gone ourselves, we have to teach our children, we have to teach other folks that we have to protect our strides and our advances. Otherwise, all of our work will be reversed.
Well, Ashton, I want to thank you, brother, for your friendship. I want to thank you for your work. I don't get a chance to tell you near as often as I need to, man, how much I appreciate you, how much I respect what you do, and how much we need what you do. I want to thank you for educating me and inspiring me and challenging me to be the best that I can be, because you all are doing a tremendous work. And I think it's only when we come together that we're going to see the changes that we need to see in this country. And to your last point, you're right. I think we've been asleep at the wheel, and we've seen a lot of reversals come about of strides that were made in the past. And we need to make sure that this time the progress that's made is etched in stone and is irrefutable and irreversible. But that's going to call for a change, I think, in the laws of people, change in the behaviors of people, and a change in the hearts of people.
Right.
And if we can make that happen, I'm of the mind, hey, even if you don't believe it, let me change your behavior until you start believing. But we got to start with that behavior, man. Brother, I appreciate you, man. I got nothing but love for you, man. Nothing but respect.
Love you back. Thank you for you.
Man, I appreciate you. The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And the fight that is going on in our world today is a fight that we need to get involved in when we talk about the rights of people. It's sad that an organization like Black Lives Matters has been under such criticism, not by white people, but by Black people who have been half assimilated and think they have made it, and have failed to realize that all of us, if we live long enough, I don't care how nice the white people are, we're going to have a nigga moment when they're going to remind us that we are not in our proper place and we're not doing what we need to do. And we don't have the rights, and we are animals. And so it's incumbent upon us to support this fight, because you may not be the person who has the knee on your neck today. It may have been George Floyd, but I promise you, I have seen and been involved in too many instances where situations could have gone the wrong way for me personally. They didn't know I was Dr. Cofield. They didn't care. I had 3 earned degrees. I'm just a big Black man. And if I didn't do what I needed to do to survive coming out of that, we would have been in trouble. I would have been in trouble. And I want to say this, we can't go any further. Now, that's my own opinion. I didn't ask Ashton this. We can't go any further, in my opinion. And I don't want to go any further. It's a tragedy that Black men are now teaching their sons how to survive when somebody puts their knee on your neck. That's absolutely ridiculous. We should not be at that place, especially when we talk about the people who are protecting us. So let's fight the good fight. All right. Till next time, this is Dr. DZ Cofield for Real World, Real Talk, signing off. Peace.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real World, Real Talk. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes every week. Follow us via social media using the @RWRTDZ username on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To submit any comments, questions, sponsor opportunities, or future show suggestions, visit us online at rwrtdz.com or via email at info@rwrtdz.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've been inspired to be the change you want to see in the world today. Until next time, be real, keep it real, and stay real.